Let everyone be quick to hear, slow to speak, observe the planet. One of the greatest tragedies of mankind throughout the ages and still prevalent in our day is the fact that very few know how to listen, how to dialogue. You may think you're exempt, but by the end of this short homily, you may not be quite so convinced. We're all found wanting in this. If it were not the case, why are there so many bus stops in families, in workplaces, in prayer groups, even in monasteries? Now, let's get this straight. There is a fundamental difference in dynamic between listening and speaking. The mode is, in the case of speaking, that of the radio. It emits. One cannot get back to the speaker. The mode, in the case of listening, is that of the well-controlled telephone, where there is also the receiver, as well as the mouthpiece. Observe the average telephone conversation. Observe your own. Is it not true, if you're honest, that you know already what to say as soon as you have heard the opening words of the interlocutor on the phone? You can see, you think, where he or she is going, and so you are preparing already your answer. And in the process, you are no longer really listening. Compare that with a different mode of picking up the phone or addressing the person before you. It's that of something of what we have when we come to adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. We are quiet, we are in mode of humility, receptivity, and listening. Very, very few on earth, I tell you, seem to know the difference. Very few seem to be able passively to let the person speak out. Where I was for years in France, there was a physical problem insofar as the superior and the second in command and the novice master both suffered from physical deafness. Quite serious, actually. What happens in such a case? After a while, to avoid embarrassment, a person with that defect will start to talk a lot and get used to talking, and eventually will fall into the trap of no longer actually listening. Do you see how that can be devastating in the life of a community? I remember actually both my spiritual father and my brother coming years ago to our monastery separately, and both immediately coming out after talking to the superior and saying, he can't stop talking. I'm not judging, I'm just observing life. Are you in that category? You can't stop emitting, and you're not picking up what's actually of importance? It's not new. Even the classical philosophers talked about the problem in philosophical terms. Why? It concerns the capacity of man to engage with the truth. We talk a lot, and by that very fact, we convince others, and perhaps ourselves, that we know many things. The person, on the other hand, who has the inkling that there might be something he doesn't know, approaches the truth, and therefore conversation, or reading for that matter, in a different mode. In Greek, there is a concept called aporia, puzzlement. Plato, as you may know, has a series of dialogues. And this comes out. Don't ignore this, it concerns you, if you want to advance in the skills and tools of life. For instance, somebody now who decides to go to the toilet, it can happen in a homily, I've noticed, will go out with the same volume of knowledge that he had when he went out, and will return with the same. Somebody who doesn't switch off at this moment and go into the solving of problems, perhaps will gain until death a clue. So listen. Socrates. He questions the one he's talking to about the nature or definition of a concept, virtue, courage. And then he goes into a mode of testing. Now this in Greek is elenchein, so it's the elenchic method. He doesn't know a thing, and he tries to pump the person before him. Listen. He asks a question, listens to the answer, and then indicates the answer is unsatisfactory. After a number of such failed attempts, the person being questioned admits he is in aporia, in puzzlement. He has the humility, therefore, to recognize he doesn't know everything about the examined concept. In Plato's Meno, Socrates describes the purgative effect of reducing someone to aporia. It's getting him to the truth. The truth as a starting point, tabula rasa, for actually progressing in searching it. Getting him out of his comfort zone. And by the way, how many people are just impossible to teach? They will not stop teaching you. They are completely refractory to anything which might be new. They have it, and it could be us too if we're honest. It shows someone who merely thought he knew something he does not, in fact, know. And instills a desire. What's this? Quizziness. He wants to investigate. It's what made Socrates brilliant. Remember, he went to the Delphic Oracle and asked who it is who knows most in the world. The Delphic Oracle answered it was Socrates. And the answer to his question then was because Socrates was the only one in the world who knew he didn't know anything. Listen to this. You know what a syllogism is? It's you have the premise and then the next one, and then you have what puts them together, the synthesis. What the sight of our eyes tells us is to be believed. True? The second one, sight tells us the stick is bent in water. True? Normal consequence would be, therefore, the stick is bent. One is in a concept called ataraxia, complete perplexity. There's something wrong. We know the answer. It's because light travels in a different way in water. It's the same, actually, with our capacity to engage in dialogue. Are we following the rules of logic? Because in a conversation, as Pope Benedict pointed out always, there was always an element of truth, but there was something missing. And that's what people can't handle. They can't see yet that perhaps there's a bit they haven't seen. And correct dialogue is to go calmly through all the listening process, and then, as Benedict would do when he was head of the CDF, he would point out, but there's something you haven't seen. It's a different mode rather than which is the usual result of dysfunctionality in conversation. Because every person is, if he's true to himself, following a certain guided light of his own truth. But the problem quite often is this. If a person betrays that he doesn't want actually to go into a possibility about something else, there's something actually at fault in his logic, because at the level of the will there's something wrong. It's what we call bad faith. And it's usually to be manifested in a bad conversation. Why are people wanting to raise their voice? It's because they're getting nervous. It's the only way they can handle it. Flight. And it's usually what goes on, actually, in quite a lot of television debates. It's getting people to look at a different issue related and attack what is in that ambit, which people know to be wrong. Association of thought, but it's not accurate logic. In family life, in community life, in relationship of any sort, it's something that we need to master. We have a choice, each one of us here, my friends. Going through life, aggressing people, talking down to people, teaching people all the time, and calmly not being afraid in the slightest of a new bit of truth. Humbly waiting for a morsel. And if there's to be growth together, and if the other person wants, we can also indicate perhaps there's a bit here that person hasn't seen. I just conclude. When a Protestant, I could have stayed that way. It was a comfort zone. One thing was in common, however. They kept aggressing the Catholic Church. Now that in itself was a point of questioning. Why? Are they afraid? It's rather like what happens in the mentality of massive indoctrination, either of communism or of a false religion. They will not handle calmly another truth. Indoctrination. If we are calm, we want to know more. If we don't, we will never ever learn anymore. And we will be teachers of the universe and die with the amount of knowledge that we have now. Which do we